On the 29th of January 2011, a group of 4 members was out in the Great Quarries to summit the Sgurr Choinnich Mor mountain. The mountain is located at the western end, separated from the rest of the peaks in the range. It is famous for its narrow summit crest and emerald mossy peak. The mountain is about 1,100 meters tall and provides a tough yet pleasant challenge for local climbers. Everything was going well until one of the climbers fell from 1,000 feet off the summit. This is the story of Adam Potter on the Sgurr Choinnich Mor mountain. Adam Potter, a man in his mid-30s, had been climbing the Scottish Highlands with his girlfriend and his friends. He was preparing for an Everest hike later that year and took scaling the Sgurr Choinnich Mor mountain as a practice climb before he made his way to Nepal. Mount Everest is about 8,800 meters tall, while the Sgurr Choinnich Mor mountain is about 1,100 meters. But the height of the mountain is not the main challenge here. It is the path and the focus you need to have on every step. The day was perfect. Adam knew the peak would be covered in snow, which gave him the perfect opportunity to experience hiking through the freezing climate. They drove toward the Great Quarries. The group of 4 was doing what they called Munro bagging. They planned to climb all the Munro Mountains for their ultimate goal to hike Mount Everest. They wanted to do a one-day trip if they reached as early as possible. It takes about 3 hours from Glasgow to the Scottish Highlands, leaving the bustling city and heading towards the lap of nature into the world of wild moors and snow-covered peaks. When they reached the car park, they were greeted by a warning sign at the entry of the route and a beautiful rough patch bordered by green grass. Each member had a rucksack full of equipment and hiking gear. For someone who planned to climb Mount Everest, he seemed mentally prepared for anything. The rucksack had a yoga mat, a couple of pairs of warm socks and sweaters, a water bottle, maps, torches, food supplies, a small camping stove, and a saucepan. Now, it takes roughly about 5 to 8 hours for an average person to climb the Sgurr Choinnich Mor, which is roughly a 20-kilometer climb. But you can cut the time if you ignore the trail and climb through the mossy areas. But taking the laid path is always recommended for any hiker. They went past the gorge walking into a beautiful open area, and the path led straight to a beautiful waterfall. The steel falls cascaded down in front of Munro on Gedanek. They had to make it on time. Even though they were prepared to camp, it wasn't a good idea as it was very cold, and the nights would get much colder. The first sign of danger they came across was an old wire bridge running across the water of Nevis. It didn't seem like it had been maintained, and it had visible signs of rust. It wasn't safe to cross the bridge, but luckily they had the option to go further up the river and then cross from where the river is narrow. The trail began getting steeper after they crossed the steel bridge. The view of the Unak Beg mountain ahead was beautiful, but that was when the climb got a bit steeper. Following along the stream, they began climbing. As they began gaining altitude, the views got even more beautiful, and trail dangerous. But it would be a relatively easy climb for an average climber, but they were tired, not to mention the heavy backpack they had, so they planned to rest before continuing. Water had probably never tasted so good. The view is mesmerizing. The feeling when you look back, retrace your steps, and see the mighty mountains, the Moors over Glen Nevis, and the thought of how far you have come, but know there is still more to climb. The trail ends after a couple of meters on the ridge between Unak Beg and the Sgurr Choinnich Beg, and so they looked across the peaty hillside to the trail that led to the peak of Sgurr Choinnich Beg. In their Munro bagging expedition, they had successfully made it to the tip of the mountain at 963 meters above sea level. The peak is a grassy dome, and as they looked at their next summit, the Sgurr Choinnich Mor, they knew this was not going to be an easy climb. Despite its narrow ridge and pointed summit, it seemed quite easy to climb. They had to climb in a line because the path was so narrow. It was about 2:30 p.m. when they arrived at the summit of Sgurr Choinnich Mor. Adam knew they had to get back soon. They realized that the terrain had suddenly gotten icier, while the others took out their crampons and axes to head back. Adam was caught on a slippery layer of ice, and he realized that he was dangerously close to the edge. Any move he made could disrupt his balance and send him straight down the cliff. He thought if he could gently slide towards a larger rock that was nearby, he could back up on it to bring his crampon out, but as soon as he moved, he lost his footing and slipped and then fell from the peak of the Sgurr Choinnich Mor. His friends witnessed him falling down the peak, but they were helpless and in shock. There was nothing they could do but stare at the edge of the eastern slope from where Adam fell. His girlfriend began calling the rescue team as his friends carefully peeked down the cliff to look for Adam. Luckily, the Royal Navy Sea King helicopter, the HMS Gannet crew, was nearby on a safety drill. The rescue team was able to respond promptly. Adam's friends were still at the same spot with their crampons and axes dug into the thick layer of ice. A fun expedition had just turned into a nightmare. When the rescue team arrived, they knew that there was no way he could have survived the fall. But there was hope. His girlfriend was devastated as she stared at the unforgiving cliff, while his friends frantically pointed out toward the point from where Adam fell. The helicopter began scanning the perimeter, looking for an injured man, possibly dead. The thick layer of snow glimmering made it harder for the rescue team. They came back to the summit and reported that they didn't find anyone. But the rescue team had seen someone about 1,000 feet below the peak. But since this man was on his feet looking at a map, the rescue team completely overlooked him. They expected a worst-case scenario. They assumed that he was just a random climber. But when they followed the trail of his belongings that had fallen from his rucksack down the mountain, they realized that he was indeed the man they were looking for. He was shaking from the shock of the fall and the sheer relief that he had survived and seemed to be looking for a way back, confirming once again that he was Adam. He was the victim. By comparison, he had fallen from about the height of the Eiffel Tower. Lieutenant Tim Barker was the observer for the crew of the HMS Gannet. He was aboard the rescue helicopter and said he couldn't believe it was Adam because he was on his feet reading a map. It was impossible for a man to fall from such a height with some minor bruising. The paramedic winched down to help him. They noticed that Adam had visible signs of bruises with a minor chest injury, and when he was re-examined by the doctor on board the helicopter, there were also minor damages to his body, and he was indeed battered. But what amazed everyone was how he tumbled from a height of 1,000 feet onto a bed of rocks and still lived to tell the tale. Lieutenant Tim Barker, in an interview, said that Adam was very lucky to be alive. It was hard for him to believe that someone could have fallen that distance and still been able to stand up at the end of it. The lieutenant also said they did not expect to find anyone alive and well, given the details of where and how he had fallen. He was prepared for the worst-case scenario. Adam Potter said that the rucksack became the cushion that saved his life. He said the saucepan in the rucksack was bent and all of his food supplies were crushed. As Adam recalled, he said the speed at which he fell was very high, and any attempt to slow himself down was in vain, as he fell over the edge of the cliff and picked up the pace again. He was consciously trying to break the fall, which failed every time he tumbled over a cliff. Just when he felt like his momentum was degrading, to his horror, he noticed a cliff approaching, and when he realized what was beyond, he simply just gave up. He knew that this was the end, but somehow it wasn't. Many people speculated that it was the thick blanket of snow that had prevented a hard impact, and the rucksack might not have helped much, but it did contribute. Adam said that his rucksack saved his life and prevented his head from hitting the ground. He also said that he was in autopilot the entire time. It wasn't until he tossed his bag into the rescue helicopter that he felt a striking pain around his shoulders. He was immediately flown to the Southern General Hospital in Glasgow, where his injuries were deemed non-life-threatening. He was kept under observation overnight before he was discharged. Despite the experience, he said that he was now more adamant about climbing Mount Everest. Everything they speculated about was just assumptions. People don't usually survive such a heavy fall. He had descended 1,000 feet, only 100 meters away from the starting point. There is no way one could explain how Adam survived this fall. If you have followed this story to this point, I would like to say a big thank you. If you like this kind of story, don't forget to hit the like button and comment below. If you're interested in this type of content, please click on the subscribe button and turn on your notification bell so you will be notified when another video is posted. Until next time, be cautious and don't ever lose your sense of wonder.